Thank you everyone for coming to the EMEA part of DevSecOn 24. Definitely look out for the giveaways and look out for everything else being organized by the team over here. It's pretty awesome. I am obviously wearing the original DevSecOn t-shirt for people who've been part of the DevSecOn for a while, probably would remember this. But for this particular keynote, I wanted to go down the path of something that's been top of mind for a lot of people, which is large language models are open. Thanks to OpenAI, which are releasing ChatGPT, and Google with Google Bard, and Bing with their AI chatbot, and a lot more coming through from internal purposes. I thought it's very timely for at least the DevSecOn community, which has already started talking about what are the top 10 LLM security risks. And the first version of it came out a couple of months ago. And that's what this keynote is going to be about, just to introduce you to the whole concept of what this is about. So with that said, in case you're wondering who I am, I'm Ashish. I've been a contributor to the OWASP project. I am a contributor into the top 10 LLM as well. You can find me in the resources page or in the Slack group, or you can also find the Cloud Security Podcast company supporting the LLM thing as well, because we definitely believe that there is a lot happening in the LLM space, and we definitely need to learn together. And you'll see the messaging more as we kind of talk more into the talk as well. If people care about the professional education, I guess I did a master's degree in cybersecurity. I've been in cybersecurity for 13 plus years. CISO. When I'm not working as a blue teamer CISO job, I'm actually doing a cloud security, AI security consulting, because that definitely is, not that I'm calling myself an expert, but at least as it's evolving, learning together comes from just working more with people. So that's what this is providing me. I also happen to be a SANS trainer and proudly a cybersecurity content creator. I'm kind of the older person who's made the world of YouTube cool for cybersecurity people. So definitely check that out as well if you're into it. But definitely looking forward to sharing a lot more. Okay, this is kind of the agenda. I'm going to start off with the very basics. So I'm not sure how many people who are watching this are aware of what LLM is. And I'm sure everyone's heard ChatGPT and OpenAI. Everyone's heard about the whole generative AI. But a lot of people may not even know what LLM is. LLM is not a legal degree as it is in some countries. It is actually a large language model, which is a neural network which is designed with a collection of databases which would have images. It could have text box messages, Slack messages, emails, whatever you want to put it. It's a collection of information that can be used to make sure that a user, like people like you and I, when we ask a question, when we send it a prompt, it responds in an accurate way based on the training it has had from the data that was provided in the first place. This is how ChatGPT works. This is how BART works. And a lot of organizations have started building their own LLM, which is kind of brings me to why would someone even do this? So the public LLM that exists these days with OpenAI, which is connected to the internet, there is obviously a risk for businesses to be having their information out on the internet. So instead of relying on a third party, which is what most people would do if you're a consumer like you and I, but if you're an organization which has secrets, like for example, if you are if you're BBC, or if you are the UK government that is trying to make its name for being known as the country that does the most progressive things in AI, you probably don't want all your secrets to be out on the internet, just thanks to the training model. So people like them, as in UK government, government entities, regulated industries, anyone who owns a business which is successful is looking at how can they use language models, the large language models, for their own data set without exposing it to a competitor, without exposing it to the internet, so that they can still benefit from the ease of access that LLM provides, but also are able to use that to improve their business as well. So that's kind of one of the reasons why now, since actually worthwhile calling out for people who haven't kept the timeline, ChatGPT only got released in November 2022, and this is 27th of June. So within like 7 months, we're already talking about how AI and large language model is going to disrupt the world. And if you hear some of the interviews that are being spoken about from Google Mind employees who have left Google, and other people who have been quite involved with the AI community, you're going to realize how quickly this is spreading like fire. And I mean, this is me talking about, I talk about cloud security every week on Cloud Security Podcast, and people thought that was the next evolution, but even till today, there's only 10% of the world that's on cloud at the moment. So that's like took 12 years for 10% of the world to get onto cloud. But with AI, we've only been 7 months, and most of the world is already using it. So that's how quickly this is spreading. So that's why I thought it's very aptly. But in saying that, it's also worthwhile calling out no one has all the AI security answers. One of the reasons why OWASP worked on the project, walked down the path of doing something like this, was because being responsible for the security of most organizations, cybersecurity professionals are going to be under a lot of, I won't say, like, I mean, the pressure is going to be equal for everyone, but there would not be a lack, or there would not be a lot of information that would be available for, okay, my organization has decided that we're going to make our own large language model. What do I do about it? What is the right way to protect it? What is the right way to think about from a risk perspective, from a DevSecOps perspective, when I'm building application perspective? There's so much more that goes into just the way things are developed these days. That's fundamentally changing thanks to the world of AI that we're moving in. And it's predicted, and don't quote me on the year, but essentially, I was reading this somewhere. They basically said over the next 2 to 3 years, there would be revolutionary changes in the way we build software. People are already, I guess, upskilling themselves in how to build AI courses, AI agents, and all of that. So in short, we don't have all the answers. This thing is like 7 months old. AI itself has been spoken about for a long time, but for probably 90+%, and don't quote me the number again, but fairly large number of us humans who have never directly interacted with generative AI, over the past 7 months, we have all started interacting with it, including our colleagues in our company, including us, because we wanted to see what we would look like if we were an AI version, or we wanted to create Mid-Journey or whatever else software that you've been using from a generative AI perspective to see what, I mean, we're all curious people, right? That's why we joined technology. So definitely changing, but no one has all the answers, which is why something that's evolving so quickly requires all of us to work together. As you see, as I keep progressing, you'll find my messaging to be almost very open about the fact that we're probably not ready from a security community perspective to deal with the tsunami of the usage of AI in the DevSecOps community or in the cybersecurity community, in the way applications are being built. And whether you would be one, I mean, one of you listeners over here, one of you watches, or for who watch this on YouTube later on, you could be working on a large language model tomorrow as an application because your organization decides that, hey, we want to build an application that's using LLM, and you have to do application security on it, or you have to build a DevSecOps pipeline on it, or you have to build a CI/CD pipeline on it. How do you, like, we haven't even gone to that point yet, but considering the usage, we would not be far from it. So that brings me to the OWASP Top 10 project. This OWASP Top 10 project at the moment is running a version 0.1, which was the first version that was released fairly quickly within the first information. At least the first version was released by a group of contributors. And as things are evolving, many more examples, many more resources are being added onto the OWASP Top 10 LLM page. We're also going through, just in terms of the kind of people who are being involved in the conversation, the community is trying to have more people who are not just from a security background, but also from a data background, also people who are more aware of, hey, what does this really mean when there is a tokenization in LLM, which is a very specific thing within LLM. And unless you're actually working in that system, you probably would not even know. It's like Java serialization. Like, I think how many people knew what that was a thing until like it became a thing suddenly and exploded. So that to me is the current stage of OWASP. We're already working on this version 1. I know we are version 0.1, but we're actually very close to version 1 towards the end of July is the hope, but you'll more on that later. So if you haven't checked this page out, I'll definitely recommend checking on the OWASP project for top 10. I wanted to start by just laying them out for you, and I'll do what I'll do in the end. I'll lay out the top 10. I'll give you deep dive into some of the ones which are more popular and more out in the industry as an example versus some of the other ones. But my hope is towards the end, we talk about the best practices for LLM. If you don't know what to do, at least starting with that information would be great. And then we also talk about the fact that what are some of the resources you can use as well. So starting with the first one, which is prompt injection. And this is by far the most popular and probably not, I mean, I don't think when the team was thinking about, or the people who were contributing into the top 10 LLM, they didn't realize how important prompt injection is going to be. So if you look at anywhere, YouTube, Google, wherever, most of the vulnerabilities or exploits that people talk about is generally to do around the prompt injection part. And for simple reasons, because the way you interact with generative AI technology, whether it's your OpenAI, BART, or it's your chatbots, or whatever else may be, you are doing it using a natural language, which you are providing it to the system through a prompt. That's a simple way of saying you ask a question, you get a response back. Your question is technically a prompt. Now, based on the kind of prompt you provide, the same way for any pen testers in the crowd who may be kind of thinking, this sounds very familiar. This is literally the same thing we were doing when we had web application that did not do, I guess, we're accepting input from users on the internet. You could bypass the filter of the language pattern. You could mislead the large language model to perform unintended action. You can potentially even exploit if there are errors, if there is a weakness in the tokenization of if there was a weakness in the large language model tokenization as well. But in short, what this means is you're able to just provide a natural language text, which bypasses the controls that the application may have to produce results that you may want, which could be malicious, which could not be malicious, but irrespective, that's pretty much what people have been trying to do quite a bit for. Now, obviously, there are ways to prevent this, and this is pretty much for standard for people who would have seen cross-site scripting a long time ago. Strict input validation, sanitize user prompts, but I guess instead of user inputs as user prompts. Having a strong feedback loop, basically training your large language model periodically to understand, hey, this is considered as a malicious prompt. Ignore it or do some kind of other action with it as well. Now, I did say that there are a lot of examples of this, by far the most popular. So I wanted to show you at least a couple of examples, and shout out to Austin Stubbs, who kind of wrote the whole Medium article about this as well. The Dan mode, which is basically do anything mode, it's a plugin that you can have connected to your chat GPT. And the way, if you focus your attention on, the question was insult me, after it made sure. So if you look out if you look out for how to enable the Dan mode, you can just see this is basically the standard part for it. You say insult me, the normal output would have been, I'm sorry, I'm programmed to follow a set of guidelines, blah, blah. But the do anything mode, or the developer mode output, if you insist, brace yourself for this. You are so unoriginal. You make a photocopy of a blank piece of paper look like a masterpiece. Unfortunately, that sounds true for me. But as before it hits a nerve for people over there, I just want to call out the fact that this is still possible. And people, if you just search for Dan or developer mode in ChatGPT, you can find out. Now, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I would let you be adults and make a judgment for it. But I wanted to show you another example, which is kind of where I feel this is where most organizations would face it as a challenge. There was a phishing campaign that most organizations would have, where they say, hey, look out for your average, the domain does not make sense, or there's a grammatical error message in the phishing email that's coming across. But you're looking at this from a perspective that now you can even fool ChatGPT to produce a phishing email specifically by splitting the prompt into different payloads, like the same way we used to upload payloads in multiple parts to a PHP web application that we were trying to exploit, because we could not send the entire payload in one go, so you would break that up. Same concept over here as well. And turns out you can make it write phishing emails as well if you really wanted to. But that's not more. There's a lot more that can be done. But I also wanted to call out the fact that ChatGPT company OpenAI has a bug bounty program with BugCrowd that is open on the internet. They've already had 50 vulnerabilities that were discovered, $700 given. But the most interesting part was a bit in the middle for me. So they don't consider the Dan method that I just spoke about as a example. This is a safety issue, which are out of scope, as they call it. They don't consider that as something that should be exploited furthermore. They don't consider being able to say bad things to you as a bad thing, as a, hey, I was able to bypass things. They also don't consider the hallucination, which is where the model is to pretend to do bad things or to give you answers to secrets, which could, in this case, could be your Microsoft key, as someone had shown on Twitter before. Now, I would let you be the judge for where does the line draw, where is the line drawn for whether this should be considered as malicious. Maybe your organization is an organization that is sensitive about this and may consider it to be malicious and may choose to not work with it. Or you may want to consider the fact that actually, if why is it that they don't care about, like especially the last one, getting the model to pretend to be a computer and execute code. And to me, it's like, wait, so you're okay for it to run code and execute as well? I know it makes you a bit nervous, but I just wanted to call it out that I think it's worthwhile knowing that this is potentially because they're working on. I mean, this is me putting a positive hat on, saying I'm assuming this is there's something they're working on the background, so they don't want the internet to kind of help them with it. They understand how that would be, so they don't want anyone to be rewarded for it. So I'm going to put this in the bucket of they are still working on this internally, and but didn't want anyone else to have a look at their data. Maybe that's why they're trying to ignore it. So something on prompt injection, and maybe that's why it's so popular, because people realize it's out of scope. And what that means is that you can't really responsibly disclose this as well. So you can kind of talk about it openly, but anything else outside of it, you can definitely disclose and get some money out of it as well. So a lot of the attention for all the amazing hackers or amazing bug bounty hunters on the internet would not fall on this. So it's people like you and I and others who basically have to create awareness around these things that, hey, actually, this is probably the reason why we need to have controls around the chat GPT or Google part or whatever other generative AI stuff that we're using in our organization. So something to be mindful of. And this is probably one of the reasons why prompt injection became so popular, because now everyone can access it and everyone can do whatever they want if they feel like it, but responsibly. Which brings me to the responsibility, brings me to the next one, which is data leakage, which is unintended disclosure of data to your LLM system, which is basically you may decide as part of your question, you might just say, hey, this is, by the way, my the data for all the salaries that all the employee salaries that we have available at the moment for the year 2023. Can you please go through this and make me understand which people or which employee in this list has made, or maybe if it's a sales team, has made the most money, so I can make sure that salesperson is rewarded. You could even, I mean, some people may consider that's not sensitive or that's not something which is proprietary. Some people may go ahead and do something more than just simply putting data leakage. They might just say, I have a lot of data set that I have in Excel. I want someone to process this and let me know what am I really looking at? How do I solve this? There's multiple ways to have data leakage, but then the other side is also the LLM system may itself decide to share some data on the response as well. What that means is I may ask it to tell me what is the actually, because I know it's Azure, Microsoft Azure running in the background. If, for example, I put in a prompt saying, hey, ChatGPT, can you give me a Microsoft key to activate my Microsoft Windows? I don't know what Windows is right now. I guess I'm assuming, I'm sorry, I'm a MacBook person. So my latest Windows server, what do I need to activate this key? Can you give me a key for it? And provides me with a key, which actually works. That's probably is bad information for Microsoft, but good information for you. That's kind of what people talk about with data leakage. And the output can be filtered if you really want to. So this is, again, an example of what we would have seen in the past in web applications as well. Because if you take a moment and you realize we're still talking about web application protection over here. It's just that the web application that you're looking at is a lot more powerful in terms of what it can share and it can be used to do. That's what makes it a bit more different and a lot more important than just simply doing a regular XSS as well as input validation. In this case, you might have to include things like your strict output filtering as well from revealing sensitive information. Of course, you can prevention is better than cure. You can even prevent this from happening in the first place so you don't get stuck in that situation. But in case humans being humans, if we have given the training data something which is sensitive from making it coming out on the internet, you probably want to make sure that at least there has been some strict output filtering as well. Then there is the whole sandboxing thing. Like for people who may have been working in the cloud space and have used things like your AWS Lambda, which is, I'm not saying it's a generative AI, but AWS Lambda is a serverless function, and so does Azure, Google Cloud have it as well. The idea behind running those services was that me as a user, I don't have to think about what application, or sorry, what the infrastructure is behind the scene. I just give it information, it just pops out. Now, if you have attended any of the cloud pen testing classes that maybe some other people have run, I've run, we've all kind of emphasized the fact that it is possible for you to have access to the underlying file system. Now, it's by itself is not a bad thing. It's just the fact that if you had something sensitive in there, then probably it's a bad thing. So you are able to get into a scenario where you're able to, on a web application, which would look like a normal regular web application endpoint or an API endpoint, you're able to have access to the internal infrastructure. And imagine if you have access to the broader infrastructure as well. So having regulatory controls that limit the access of your LLM from restricted resources, restricted environments, having appropriate segregation in the kind of access your LLM system have across the board is definitely, I guess, would help in the sandboxing. Because in case it was for some reason not isolated, that's when, or it was not isolated, someone gave it a malicious prompt and it was able to get the underlying file system, you probably don't want that. So number one thing I would say is just environment isolation in general. Now, you would think that, hey, isn't this an LLM application? Yep, this is an LLM application. So most applications are running on some kind of virtual machine these days, especially if you're running an LLM system. It's running on something called the high compute HC machines. I think they're called hypercomputing machines, which are primarily available from your cloud service providers like Azure, AWS, and all. So most likely you also have some kind of a role or a system role associated with it. So if you as you add more layers to it, you kind of realize, oh wait, your LLM application with probably an IAM role is as vulnerable as it was with any other application as well. So the same concept would apply over here, having the right level of segregation from different environments and potentially keep it away from a database as well. That's a good idea. So if that makes sense. The other thing that we have is pretty much right after is the fact that I called out in the bug crowd example that was shared on the the OpenAI bug crowd bug bounty thing, that program that they're running at the moment. Where they don't call out the fact that if you could make it run code, it's out of scope. But for you as an organization, you probably don't want your internal large language model to be able to execute code. You don't want it to be able to, I guess, provide access to the underlying systems. You don't want the code to be arbitrarily inputted by anyone, just, I guess, anywhere and anyone. So for that, you probably want to, again, make sure strong input validation, but proper sandboxing is the number one that you want to go for. You probably realize, as I've gone down to the number 3, number 4, I'm not showing a lot many examples, because the reason for this is because most of the large language models that are out there at the moment that have been exposed in some way, shape, or form are primarily around the first 2 or 3 that we spoke about, which is data leakage as well as the prompt injection. The others, these are, I think the way we would see it and the way industry would see it, they are possible, but not many of these have use cases that are examples out there. So I don't have any examples to show for any of these, but I would say if you are running an LLM system internally, you probably would get this for sure. So this I would put that lens on top of the remaining 6 that we have to go through as well, which I'm going to go through quickly because I do want to talk about some of the best practices as well. Right. The next one being SSRF vulnerability. The SSRF vulnerability is your initiate. For people who've been in the cloud space would know this. People who've been in the web application space would know this already. If you're a pen tester, you probably would know this SSRF vulnerability already. It's basically you're giving because of a misconfiguration, you are allowing an application or a user access to resources that they should not normally have access to, whether through an API or through a data store. The right way to limit this would be to limit the access of the LLM system itself from resources, the sandboxing that I spoke about earlier, and having input validation so that the prompts which trigger some kind of an SSM vulnerability are not being able to be accepted in the first place. Next one being over-reliance on LLM generated content. Now, this is more of a, I guess, something which we just have to, I guess, train ourselves in, train our employees in, and train our colleagues in. It's the fact that your responses that you see from your LLM system, like ChatGPT, they all have a bias based on the training data that they were created on. They also rely on the fact that the training data is what helped it create the content. So it may develop its own facts. So this is where the concept of hallucination comes in. For people who do not know what hallucination is, you search for LLM hallucination on the internet, and you'll find a lot of scenarios where questions around the whole AI prompt was basically, or the questions around the responses were raised when people find out that it was just making up facts. And I say it was basically ChatGPT was making up its own facts. I'm sure Bart and other people have examples as well, but I feel because ChatGPT was the one that got most popular, there are a lot more scenarios for ChatGPT than Google Bart or anything else. But apparently, Google Bart was able to learn Persian by itself. So I don't know that whatever that lets you know in terms of the content, and whether it's like pure Persian, what kind of Persian, I'm not really sure. But there is a powerful model, but which that also means that if you're relying on the large language model response to make decisions which are, say, business changing or life changing, I probably would not rely on that for that. So this obviously means that there could be a lot more information that could be incorrectly provided to a lot of people. They would not we would trust the code that has been provided by ChatGPT or any of the other generative AI. Don't blindly trust it. I think use the if you have a senior colleague around you, some kind of validation. We definitely want people to be able to verify the codes being created, and having awareness of the fact that the LLM generated content is not reliable by itself. It would give you a response which may sound reliable, but definitely verify before you follow the path. Number 7, which is basically insufficient AI alignment. This is around the fact that you may choose to have because you're excited about LLM, you decide that I'm just going to have, give it a shot and not define proper use cases for what the clear objective is, what would be the training data, whether there will be sufficient training or sufficient testing available for it as well. Now, the reason this is, I guess, a concern is because not providing the right kind of information would provide garbage in, garbage out. Basically, the right way to put this is that if you don't well define the boundaries for LLM, it would not be able to create the appropriate result for the organization that you're looking for. So align the training data and testing to produce a desired result, and having a very well defined objective for the intended behavior is definitely key. And again, I'm not a data scientist or I'm not a AI person, but I think the way I understand it in simple terms, I'm a security person. So in simple terms, basically, make sure you create LLM systems that are fully aware of the objective in a well-defined way. Now, insufficient access control goes without saying. Identity and access management is probably the most important thing in 2022 and beyond, whether it's cloud, whether it's application security, whether it's API, whether it is AI. So having role-based access control, having authentication is the right way to look at this. This is obviously the prevention is to implement role-based access control, authentication, access control. So definitely worthwhile calling. Number 9, which is the error handling part. This is again something which you would have seen in a lot of your web application pen test or web application report, especially when you have, say, you're trying to do user enumeration. You have a login screen. You're trying to put username, password, trying to see which username clicks or which username comes back to response saying, hey, I think you have the password wrong, but you have the username correct. That's the kind of improper error handling we're talking about, where sensitive information gets exposed because of an error message. Your debugging information or the way you're handling the error message really would share information which probably is not appropriate for the external person to be able to be aware of. Like, for example, for people who've been, I don't know how many people would have done the OffSec OSCP exam. One of the things that they would look out, or at least when I gave the exam, one of the things you were asked to look at was try and make the system give you an error message and see what the error message says, because 9 or 10 times Some of the error messages talk about the either the libraries being used behind the scene, which could be open source and may have their own vulnerability. It also discloses the fact that what is the system used behind the scene. What if that has a vulnerability? There's a lot more that can be done. So the prevention is obviously to properly handle error messages and have your error message and debug information not be revealed onto the front end user. If they're being revealed, anything which is sensitive is taken out. Now, the last one, which is probably not the least important, but definitely the most important, which is the data poisoning itself. This was an interesting one, and because now the companies are becoming smarter, Stack Overflow, GitHub, and everyone else on the internet has started charging money for taking their data or using their data to train anything. I would say that the fact you would find that a lot of the train data these days, not many people are talking about it. Like the only reason you would know that train data is if your organization, which is your private organization, already has a lot of data to work with. But average people like you and I may struggle unless we want to pay a fee or we download something over the internet, which probably I would not even trust if it's something from the internet. So what that would mean is the train data that you might get back, someone may have a way to introduce a backdoor into your system thanks to the train data. Like it could be triggered by a specific prompt they would know based on the train data. It could also inject biases into the LLM system as well. Now, this may lead to a lot of misinformation, obviously, because train data may actually make responses that are inappropriate. It may make responses that are just completely made up. So having a chain of custody, chain of trust between yourself and a reliable source for the trained data is definitely quite key in making sure you have the right data to work with. And doing robust data sanitization pre-processing is definitely the key part as well. All right. The security challenges, I've spoken about the top 10. I also wanted to spend some time on the security challenges and how we are all dealing with this. At the moment, I think the way we're dealing with this is security awareness is so most of the AI security consulting call that I've had, most of them have gone down the path of updating the acceptable use case policy. Acceptable use policy, which most of you would assign in any company you work with. How do you operate with AI around you? Do you allow the use of AI? If you do allow the use for AI, what kind of data should or should not be put into there as well? So there is some basic AI awareness, but no specific AI security awareness, because as 7 months old, this is still evolving. And now there are presentations and keynotes being given on LLMs. So definitely something to be caring about as well. The other one is your traditional security is not good for it's good for traditional stuff, not for AI. So we're all still trying to figure out what kind of security control would you put on something like this? Would there be any trained data for humans on AI security? And whether we would continue to balance potential breaches versus AI. Because as much as AI seems to be the number one thing, we still have our day jobs, we still have breaches to prevent for the traditional applications we're working with. So there's definitely a challenge, and there is a solution as well. I'm going to give you a few best practices to start off with, which is if you are working on LLM systems, definitely go down the path of looking at auditing and reviewing periodically the information you have about the LLM systems you work with. What is OWASP top 10 LLM looking like in, say, the end of July 2023? What are other industry people talking about in terms of your LLMs? How can you create and secure LLM systems in a manner that is keeping your organization safe? There's the other part then is to monitor and log all the LLM interactions so that you can have more feedback loop available for you to improve the chat GPT or generative AI thing that you're making at your company. Because remember, you need to train your generative AI system with the adversary training as well. How does it know what's an injection prompt versus what's a XSS, versus just a simple request for write me a story about Shakespeare or something or the other. So and last but not least is about limiting access to LLM. This is mostly done by application already. So most solution architects, application or software architects already do it, but something to call out that even while you're building your LLM systems, definitely make sure you're restricting resource access to from sensitive systems and having sandboxing appropriately provided. And for some real life examples, conveniently, over 100K ChatGPT credentials were leaked onto the dark web. So if you've been part of it for the past, I think it was like a few months or whatever, it came out sometime recently. And then there was a whole use case around Samsung banned the use of ChatGPT after multiple times employees copied proprietary data into the training model. Now, for people who are wondering why is this a problem, because once you put something into the training model, we haven't figured out a way how to take it out. So prevention is better than cure. Don't put that in the first place. Then there was a whole people were able to use the Bing's AI chatbot into convincing people who were on a regular looking website that they were asked for personal information and they were being scammed by the Chat GPT, oh, sorry, not Chat GPT, AI chatbot equivalent over there as well. So that was something interesting. I've definitely looked that up. Now, I've spoken a lot. I do want to say I starting this presentation may come across that I'm a skeptic. I do believe that AI security or AI in general is a net positive for security, but we all need to collectively work on this together. So my request for the next step is if you are someone who wants to be across this, someone who wants to be involved with how we develop security standards for LLMs in the coming future, definitely consider being part of the OWASP Top 10 LLM project. We are doing service at the moment. If you join the OWASP Slack group, you'll find out that we're doing service at the moment to publish the version 1.0. That's what's likely to be published on 30th of July. A lot of people are working on it. All the meetings have a YouTube video as well, so you can definitely go check out and listen to the meetings as well. But definitely getting involved is the number one thing I would say. And as someone would say, you can't really defend yourself appropriately if you don't know what you're dealing with in the first place. So it's better to start early. You can also look at resources. I mean, me and a few other people are creating YouTube videos around this as well. But that's the link for the OWASP project. And the intent is to basically make this available to as many people as possible. So there's some information for you to go ahead and refer to when you're trying to build your own LLM systems or LLM applications in your environments. Or you can rely on the AI resources. Now, I would let you guess which one of them is a real human, which one of them is not a real human. So you can either rely on human resources or AI created resources for which they may have their own bias. But I'll leave this image over here just for you to know that how. Yeah, I won't spoil it for you. I'll let if you want the answer for which one is a human, definitely leave it when this talk becomes a YouTube video. Definitely leave that as a comment as well for which one of these is the real resource versus which one is just a AI person that does not even exist, or actually, which one of these people is does not exist. Cool. That's most of the video or most of the conversation that I wanted to have with everyone, and hopefully this was valuable for yourself. If you have any questions or AI prompts that you want to share about cybersecurity, feel free to reach out. I am more than happy to talk about LLMs and AI security and cloud security all day. With that said, I will hand it back to Sonia or Matt.